Where does every projected NFL starting quarterback rank entering 2024? We're offering our take today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Joseph, it's been a while since we've hopped on the airwaves together. You went to the beach, I went to the mountains, survived the bears. What's going on?
Not much. So for everybody that hears that, they're like, well, we listened to you record all last week. Well, we did. Yeah, we recorded everything in advance, but we haven't recorded together in over a week.
It's been 9 days.
10 days, something like that.
9, 10 days, yeah.
So, yeah, it's weird. Everything feels weird. As normal as this is, it feels weird.
I see go ahead. Okay.
Please.
I was going to say, I see you're drinking a hydration beverage as well today. What is it?
Yeah, of course, my Gatorade hydration electrolytes beverage that I need.
I have big news on that front.
Are you in?
I'm in on Prime.
Oh, okay.
The hydration stuff, though, not the caffeinated stuff, because I know the kids are drinking the caffeinated ones and over caffeinating themselves, and I'm not annoying the caffeinated ones, but which is good for me because I was usually a C4 drinker.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of caffeine in those, but I like it's like a coconut water hydration type. The lemonade one is pretty good.
Yeah. Eric Wood, big fan of Prime.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. It sponsors his podcast, Centered on Buffalo. So Prime.
So he had Bobby Babbage on recently.
Yeah. E. Wood gets great guests all the time.
I'm sure he does.
You saw bears at the mountains, and I'm very jealous of that because we go to the mountains, I don't know, probably 4 times a year. I've never seen a bear, ever. We always, we are driving slow through the Blue Ridge Parkway, trying to see one freaking bear. You saw like 6?
Yeah, well, 7 total.
Oh,
so
God.
First one ran out in front of us, driving down the road, and it was like 3 p.m. It was an adolescent. And then we were driving up the mountain to the place where we stayed with my dad's family. And we saw 2 more walking along like a driveway. And then I was walking stuff out to the car after we parked. And around the back end of the car comes the bear.
This was a healthy sized bear. I saw this bear.
This was a large black bear. Yeah. And black bears don't obviously get huge like brown bears, grizzly bears, polar bears, all that stuff. But this was a large black bear. And we're like, oh, that's a large bear. And then you look at the bear and you realize, oh, that's a bear that's feeding other bears. And then 2 minutes later, the 3 little cubs came running around down the driveway too. And we had 18 people staying at this cabin in the woods. And
what'd you do?
Everybody was kind of like out on the deck. A couple people were in one of the cars. I was walking out to the car and the bear was coming down the driveway at me. And then you realize it's a mother bear. And everybody's like, oh, okay. Yeah, this just got a lot more serious. We got to chill out a little bit.
Did you have a plan? Like, I know be big, yell, yo, bear, whatever bear whistles.
We're
you ready to go or what?
Bear, letting it know that there were a lot of us. Yeah.
Hey, bear.
Yep.
Were you doing that?
Yep.
Oh, man. The Eagle Scout, Kyle Crabbs. It was your moment.
Let's talk quarterbacks.
Anytime I get into Eagle Scouts, you're like, all right, let's get off of that.
Yeah, let's get off of that topic. Yeah. We're doing quarterback rankings today, but I think a more effective way, we want to discuss our methodology early on. It's more tiers than it is anything else, where the objective of what we're doing, because of how important quarterbacks are to every individual team and team success, is Joe and I have broken the 32 projected starting quarterbacks into scored tiers, with the objective being putting a quantifiable number based on how you rank amongst the hierarchy of NFL quarterbacks to score your starting quarterback for our roster rankings. The past 8 weeks, we've done each individual team, quality starters, cornerstones, adequate starters, blah, 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 blah. If you missed your individual team, you can go find it. If you want to find out about the whole league and how we view the whole league, we got 8 weeks worth of shows for you. But quarterbacks don't get scored the same way, and it's more about the hierarchy within the league. And I think there's some really interesting lines that you can draw based off of how we have this tiered out. But Pat, as an example, is in a tier of his own. He gets 11 out of 10 points because he is the elite of the elite. And then the next 3 guys down are in a tier and they get 10 points. And the next 3 guys down are in a tier and they get 9 points. And you and I got to those tiers by individually ranking the starting quarterbacks 1 through 32. There's some interesting discrepancies there that I know we're going to get into, but just kind of setting the table of, like, for example, your third quarterback is my 5th quarterback. My 4th quarterback is your 6th quarterback. There's not a lot of deviation with the exception of 2 players in the top 22 quarterbacks in the league. Like, most of them are within 2 or 3 spots with the exception of 2, Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts.
All right. So that's the methodology. We got a few discrepancies, but we took the average to make this reflective of our rankings.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other part where there was discrepancy was kind of how we dealt with the bottom tier, which we'll get to. That's kind of like the last segment. Kyle and I think we had different approaches to that, which is good because this average is marrying together the 2 different approaches that we have.
Yeah.
To give it the combined list here. So I think the easiest part of the conversation is like what you already mentioned. It's the top, like Patrick Mahomes. Congratulations. You're the best quarterback in the NFL. You get a special amount of points that are only for you. So that's easy. Everybody knows he's amazing. Then we have 3 quarterbacks in the bucket of players that gets 10 points, right? So Pat Mahomes gets 11. The next 3 players get 10. And those players for us are Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and Matthew Stafford.
Stafford's the one that's going to surprise him.
That's the interesting one.
Yeah.
I don't think Allen, Burrow, awesome, good players. Stafford's the interesting one. And I'm not necessarily sure he should be. Now, you had him at 3. I had him at 5.
Yep.
But Stafford's a dude, man. Like, historical numbers throughout his career. He won the Super Bowl. He's been good under multiple systems, coaches, personnel around him. Like, the man deserves his flowers. And we didn't really talk about it in advance, but we both came in really high on Matt Stafford.
Yeah. The performance against Baltimore last year was one of the better individual game performances I watched on tape. Maybe not like the statistics, maybe don't blow you out of the water, just like the stats from Matthew Stafford last year don't blow you out of the water in 15 starts. But they have the ability to do so much with Matthew Stafford, and he can still move. He's not super mobile. I think the durability is a big concern when you consider he's missed half the season in 2 of his last 5 seasons in general. And he's a player who is a late stage quarterback at what he's going to turn 36 or 37 next offseason in February. So how long there is to work with is kind of the debate. And I think if you were starting a franchise moving forward, it'd be a very different conversation about Matthew Stafford. But the arm ability is electric. The way he's able to manipulate the football, the way he manipulates zone defenders, the way he can access all levels of the field. He doesn't have to throw with timing, but he can throw with timing. He knows how to use his eye. Like, there's so much there for me. He's one of the more complete profiles of quarterbacks in the league right now. And as long as he can stay healthy, he's going to give the Rams a really good chance to win a significant amount of football games.
The quarterback that we've heard the most from this offseason is without a doubt CJ Stroud, right? Like, that dude's on every media opportunity. His quotes are going viral left and right. But the one that stuck out to me in the 10 million that I've watched of CJ Stroud this offseason was the one where he was asked about what quarterback he watched. What did he say? He said, I watched Stafford. He's like, I mean, Mahomes, these guys are really cool. I like to watch their highlights and stuff like that. He's like, talk about a guy that plays it, the position the right way, and like the guy that he focuses in on. He says, I watch all of the Matthew Stafford stuff. And that is what it is. That's what CJ Stroud said. But I found that to be pretty interesting and pretty closely aligned with the player that I've come to appreciate in over a very long time of watching Matthew Stafford.
Yeah. And isn't it incredible to now 15 years in for Matthew Stafford to reflect at how he's viewed now and then think about how he was viewed like late stage Detroit, like 4 or 5 years ago. Matthew Stafford and the 74-90 record and can't get over the hump and this and that. And it really is a testament to, as important as a quarterback is, it's the full product that allows you to have the cumulative success that every fan hopes their team has.
Well, folks, obviously we have a lot more to get to. We're 4 quarterbacks into this thing, so we're getting into all of the rest of it here on the other side, so be sure to stick with us. I love sports. I love them so much and never want them to stop, but as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Obviously, we're talking quarterbacks today, so I have some fun quarterback props that you can check out over at FanDuel. They've got Patrick Mahomes at plus 600 to lead the NFL in passing touchdowns. I think the value is at CJ Stroud at plus 1,300, Joe Burrow at plus 1,100, as opposed to Mahomes at plus 600. In terms of leading the NFL in passing yards, you can get Tua or Dak at plus 1,000, which I think is a pretty good play for either one of those two. And then for rookie quarterbacks, you can get plus odds on all rookie quarterbacks not named Caleb Williams to lead the NFL rookies in passing yards. So Caleb Williams is at minus 115. They got Jaden Daniels at plus 320. Bo Nix at plus 480. So check all of that out. Head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
I think it is also worth acknowledging as we get into the deeper portions of this. We had 8 of the 10 quarterbacks in the top 10 we had as consensus top 10 quarterbacks, or is it 7? It was Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Stafford, Jackson, Prescott, Herbert, Jared Goff. I'm not a math guy.
8 of 10.
8
right?
out of 10.
Yeah.
As consensus top 10, just what order they happen to stack. And none of those in the top 10 that were consensus were more than 2 rankings above or below each other for our respective lists that we did blind before we came in and took the average of them.
The quarterbacks that are getting 9 points each: Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert. So this is the next bucket that we have after the Allen, Burrow, Stafford bucket, which of course follows the Mahomes bucket. These are top tier quarterbacks. Like we're still talking about really, really outstanding players. And we both had them fairly close, like you mentioned there, all within 2 spots of each other on our own individual ballots. Is there anything interesting to you that stands out about this little bucket here?
I think the Lamar, you do have a little bit of a sub tier where we clearly coveted Lamar and Dak a little higher than Justin, but Justin's average kind of parks him as in this same bucket. Lamar and Dak were 4th and 6th respectively for each one of us, just flip-flopped on each other's lists. Feels like we've kind of exhausted the Dak Prescott conversation to some degree for his evolution as a player. Lamar, you're obviously excited about what another year in that system looks like. I think his individual dynamics as a player will be important for an offensive line that has 3 new starters this year between right tackle with Rosengarten and both of the guard spots are going to be new this year too. So I think Lamar's in a unique situation to maybe mitigate some of that with what he does as a player. I think there's more pressure on Dak. especially with him looking to get another contract. If that doesn't get done before the season, I think that'll be an interesting one to watch. But I think there is a little bit of a sub-tier there, respectively. We both had Herbert, who's our 7th ranked quarterback on this list, just based off of in the 5 to 7 tier. You had him 7th and I had him 9th.
The next tier is the most fascinating one. This is where we had the 2 biggest discrepancies towards the top. All of these players are getting 8 points. Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts. And the 2 big discrepancies here are Jordan Love, who you had at 7 and I had at 14, and Jalen Hurts, who you had at 13 and I had at 8.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Love first here, who, I mean, it's a pretty big difference, 14 and 7. I'd like to say what I have to say here first.
Go ahead.
Because I love Jordan Love. I love him. He's one of the most exciting young quarterbacks in the NFL. Would be high on my list of guys to start a franchise with. For me, it's just about the sample size. Let's see the sample size expand. So I'm going to agree with whatever led you to put him at 7. I agree with you. Trust me. For me, it's just I just want to see more sample size.
I think that's fair. I just can't see it. Matt LaFleur, young group of skill players that's really, really deep. The physical talent is there. I wouldn't go as far as what Mike Tannenbaum said, I think, when we were on hiatus. He said he'd pay him a $600 million contract or whatever it was. But the tools are all just there. I liked Jordan Love a ton coming out. And then to see kind of the switch flip for him the way that it did down the stretch last season, I think maybe the way that it goes wrong is all of that positive momentum turns into flying a little bit too close to the sun and learning how to balance that aggressive play at times. But I'm just really, I think he's in a great situation. I think he's going to perform at a high level again this year. And I think the tools and the ceiling for what he is, in addition to what he wasn't down the stretch last year, was enough for me to say, I think he's going to be an upper echelon quarterback this year.
Bill Belichick had a quote in the last couple of years that stands out to me about Love. Well, not necessarily about Love, but about quarterbacks. He said once players kind of enter, they show a certain level of play at some sustained level, like at the quarterback position, they're going to stick around, right? You don't see quarterbacks play like Love did down the stretch, and then all of a sudden, they can't play.
Right.
So that gives me a lot of hope, and I am not predicting a regression at all for Jordan Love. For me, it's all right, let's see a little bit more, and then we'll go crazy and put him high on the list.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Hurts is the other piece of this, who I had who I had at 8, and you had at 13. Jalen Hurts, for all the conversations about him having a down season last year, career high in passing yards, career high in touchdowns, I think the scheme failed him. I think he had a high school caliber offensive coordinator that didn't have any built-in checkdowns and hot reads. And of course he struggled under pressure because he had nowhere to go with the football. I am not quick to forget the player I watched in 2022, the player that we watched in the postseason and the Super Bowl. And I have a level of confidence that with Kellen Moore back in the mix, with a more sound play caller and designer of scheme, that you're going to see a whole lot more 2022 Hurts than you did 23 Hurts down the stretch.
I think that's probably a fair expectation too. I think the best things that Jalen Hurts does as a player really stems from what he can do as a dual threat player. I think you also saw him kind of get banged up mid-season last year, and I think that impacted him to some degree as well. I just want to see the continued growth as a passer, right? And the more that you can do, and I will acknowledge some of the limitations were probably a result of the scheme, but in the same way that you want to see Jordan Love give you a bigger sample size, I would like to see Jalen Hurts kind of showcase that this kind of box that they got put in offensively. I want to see him transcend that. And when he does, I think I'll probably be much more comfortable putting him back up into the air and stratosphere. And make no mistakes, I still like him. We have him as a cornerstone player.
Yeah.
And really we kind of view the league as a whole as a top half and a bottom half, because we have 16 quarterbacks that were graded as cornerstones or quality starters, and the other half of the league is not. And Jalen Hurts in that conversation, I think a lot of this is splitting a lot of hairs, and that's why we do it with the tiers, right? Because if you took a guy at 8 and it's Kirk Cousins, who's in the 8-point tier, and you told me that he should be behind somebody who's in the 7-point tier, you're going to have a legitimate argument for why, right? Like it is that close. So that's why we try to do the scoring this way, where you really only start to feel the separation after you get a few tiers apart from each other. And where I had Hurts and where you had Hurts, it's kind of that example of, I'd have had him in the 7-point tier, you'd had him in the 8-point bucket. It's there's that argument. We take the average and the consensus of it, and he ends up in the 8-point bucket is the last one who qualifies for that bucket.
I think one of the cases against Jalen Hurts is like, dude, you got A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and a great offensive line and Dallas Goedert. Like, you got the stuff, man. You got the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what
we see some simple schemes that have a lot of success because they just have the talent, right? Right. And if that's, and to your point, like, yeah, he did set career highs in passing touchdowns and passing yardage, but the efficiency of it wasn't there. And with him having as much as he did at his disposal, even if the scheme was bad, which it was, and even if he was banged up, he played. Mm-hmm. So I got to grade him on that.
All right, Kyle, we got more than half the league to get to in segment 3, so be sure to stick with us. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Do you want to do the rest of the top half of the league?
Yeah.
Go 12. We'll just do this. The 7 and 6 point buckets together, because that's the kind of the quality starters guys that we have left.
Yeah. So the 7-point bucket here, CJ Stroud, Tua Tagovailoa, Brock Purdy. This is the Shanahan disciples, productive quarterbacks, really good players. Want to see how high the ceiling is, right? That's kind of this group of guys. And then we have the 6-point bucket is Trevor Lawrence and Aaron Rodgers.
Most of these are pretty consistent. Only two of these, 3 of these guys got a 10 or 11 vote between the two of us. I had Tua 10, Stroud 11. You had Purdy 11. And the rest of this is kind of like, hey, these are high teens guys, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So I think each one of these individual guys has their own individual questions. I think their supporting casts around them will help to dictate their ceiling. That, as far as some of the guys above them are perceived as more of individual catalysts as players, as compared to key cogs within the larger machine as a whole. But I don't think it's a coincidence that you look at each one of these Shanahan tree players specifically, and the coveting of skill players, and Houston going out and getting Stephon Diggs, and San Francisco having a smorgasbord of talent at their disposal, and Miami adding more to what they had versus last year when it was Hill, Waddle, and Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane. There's a certain style of play. Each one of these teams has their own individual flavor on it. But I think that's the central theme, and that you can't deny that they are quality starting quarterbacks. It's which one can take the step to be the next big play catalyst as an individual type player. And I know that's where they get to be polarizing players because people have a lot of thoughts on what their physical abilities are not going to allow them to be.
Speaking of polarizing players, I mean, the 6-point bucket of Trevor Lawrence and Aaron Rodgers. Trevor Lawrence just got the bag. Super talented, uneven play, turnovers, production's questionable. Obviously, I think he's got plenty of room to go up, right? I mean, you look at him and you say, who can climb? It's Trevor Lawrence. And then Aaron Rodgers at 16. Let's be real here. Didn't play last year, and the year before was the worst of his career, and he's 40 years old. So,
right.
Yeah, like, is there reason to be optimistic if you're a Jets fan and that he could be awesome with the Jets? Like, sure. But you're not pointing to the last 2 seasons and giving me reasons to believe that. Then we get to this next bucket. This is your 5-point bucket. Kyler Murray, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield. All quarterbacks who have had moments, but sustained, like, playing at a high level consistency without drop-offs, without limitations, I think from all of them, I think is where you kind of put them in this bucket outside of the top 16.
Yeah. Kyler individually, I know, is a really polarizing one because a lot of people have a lot of different outlooks on him, and the people who really value extended playability and arm strength, Kyler pops in those areas in a really big way. But the limitations as far as middle of the field passing and kind of how they've structured their offenses for Kyler, I think is one of the big questions that I have with Kyler. I mean, you would assume the Cliff Kingsbury offense was going to be perfectly tailored for him, and they go in a different direction. And now Gannon's staff trying to use the half-season sample size to come up with something bigger for him. I think that's a more limiting way to play quarterback. And you see quarterbacks that can have success doing that, right? To some degree, it's part of what made Russell Wilson a really impactful long-term passer was arm strength down the field, escapability, use your legs. But I just think that's a style of play of playing the quarterback position that can also get you derailed. People think about if you can't win outside of structure, but I perceive Kyler as more of an outside of structure player that there's more margins, I think, within the chaos when that's how you play the game.
Kyler Murray is a chaos merchant, Kyle Crabbs.
Yes.
I think the best description I've heard of Kyler Murray is that he plays the quarterback position like he's a matador. You know what I mean? Just like get everything as close to him as possible and then use the twitch and make a play.
Yep.
I mean, I think that's valuable, but
if it's the identity, if it's the identifying component of who you are as a player, that's where your question is look, how far can that carry you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of variance with the results of your team. The 4-point bucket, Deshaun Watson, Jacoby Brissett, Derek Carr.
The one with the most upward mobility here is Watson, right?
You like to think. Yeah.
Because in 2019, Watson would have we didn't do this process back then. You'd been what, 9 or 10-point bucket?
Oh, yeah, high up there.
Yeah. It's how close can you get back to that form? And if it doesn't happen now, will it ever happen? Like, I think that's kind of the fair question, where when he first came back, it was after missing a year and a half's worth of time. And then there were injuries last season. Hopefully he's able to be healthy for a full season and you get to see like what it all looks like and you could put it all back together. But you're starting to get so far away from that it's hard to put any faith in how high the ceiling can go. I do think out of the 4-point bucket, though, he is the one who Jacoby Brissett is what he is. I don't think he finishes the season as the starter. And Derek Carr, you also kind of have some questions and concerns about being in a new environment and them having that last year and now trying to figure out how to acclimate that to what he does well with an offensive line that I don't think is going to give him a lot of help.
I like to make a comment about Watson. 341 passing attempts since 2020.
Yeah.
And I think the thing about Watson is he's an instinctive player. Like that's what made Watson great, is like instinct, second reaction. being a bit of a chaos merchant himself. And I think those moments working out well, they're harder for a guy like Watson to get back to that given the absence. Like, I think if some pocket quarterback, read it and rip it, I think they're able to step back in quicker than a Deshaun Watson, who I think is a visual, instinctive player.
Yeah.
The 3-point bucket, Caleb Williams, Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, and Russell Wilson. Talk about the weirdest mix of quarterbacks you could possibly have.
Well, now we're into the bottom quarter of the league, right?
Yes.
Where
Yeah.
there's so many different the resumes of everybody from Derek Carr up is to some degree well established. You kind of have a feeling what the guys are. Caleb Williams, Anthony Richardson, who knows, right? Like, Caleb hasn't played a snap. I know we both have high expectations for Caleb Williams. Richardson has all the physical potential in the world with a coaching staff that maximized a quarterback that wasn't as physically gifted as he is in Jalen Hurts. So what can he do with Anthony Richardson? They have another year of invested skill players around him after getting a little bit of a sample size between training camp and the first part of the season to see what he does well. Ton of upward and downward mobility for both of those guys.
Yeah.
But then there's Daniel Jones and Russell Wilson, who you're kind of back into, we know what you are. We just don't necessarily like it all that much.
That's a perfect way to say it. The 2-point bucket, Bryce Young, Pro Bowler Gardner Minshew, Sam Darnold, and Will Levis, which leaves Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels as your 1-point quarterbacks. The bottom of the league is like what we mentioned at the top, or the bottom 10 spots or so. We had a lot of variance between us.
Yeah.
Where I think that you are more willing to lean. I think overall with this project, I think you were more willing to lean into things that are more projected. And I think I went more with, okay, what have you told us to this point? I mean, I think very highly of some of these quarterbacks that are low down here. I just haven't seen it yet. I think you were more willing to lean into some of your forecasts.
Yeah. It's such a hard line to draw between the individual skills of the player and the environment that they are in, right? So this is not necessarily what order would you pick them to start an offense because you wanted to dummy proof the process of getting to having a good offense, right? That's not really what this is. It's more of, for me, where do I think your career trajectory based off of what I know about you is going to take you? And that's kind of how I try to approach every conversation that we had with the quarterback specifically.
Who's the quarterback in the NFL that you are the most excited about this year? Like that, where there's things to learn about this player, but you find yourself like, I'm really excited to see it.
It might be Will Levis.
Brother, that was the name in my head too. And not necessarily excited because I'm optimistic. I just want to know.
Yeah, I liked Will a ton early Kentucky Will, and then their offense was a disaster their last year there, and he played hurt, and things weren't necessarily great for them last year offensively after the first start, but they invested a ton. They spent a ton of money. Center, wide receiver, running back. They have invested a lot. They seem to think they can win.
Yeah.
And it's in an offense that's a totally stylistically different offense that I want to see what it looks like. So that for me is the biggest grand chemistry experiment. And I think with a new regime, with a new coaching staff, I don't think they're necessarily married to anything with Will. But as a player who I saw something with at Kentucky and said, hey, I think you can play a little bit. That's the one that I really want to see how it turns out.
I'll offer Anthony Richardson. Unbelievable tools, obviously. Some really big-time flashes as a rookie. And that's another team that brings a really good offensive line to the table, run the ball well. Of course, with Jonathan Taylor, they've added weapons. And I'm a big Shane Steichen believer. I think he proved a lot to us in his rookie season with the Colts, where like so many things didn't go the way they were supposed to. And they were one missed Gardner Minshew pass away from hosting a playoff game, right? Like, I can't wait to see what that looks like and if he can stay healthy.
Yep. Who are you most skeptical of?
Oh boy. I have the whole league at my disposal to give you an answer.
Whole league at your disposal. I'll give you mine. It's Aaron Rodgers. Just the height. They're going to have a good team. And we're going to predict. I have a feeling we're going to predict the Jets to win double-digit games this year. Like that's kind of my expectation. But the expectation that Rodgers at this point, with everything in New York, and I have a lot of questions about the coaching staff. How much of it is the coaching staff? How much of it is just going to be Aaron calling it on the fly? For a player who's coming off a severe injury with a team that spent their own respective significant amounts of money to bring in a bunch around him, but players that you don't know how long you're going to have them for, right? Tyron Smith has major injury questions, and you feel good about having Olu Fashanu as the third tackle. But your other wide receiver answer being Mike Williams, Aaron himself, I'm skeptical that it's going to be the explosion that's going to justify what the 2-year circus in New York has been around having Aaron Rodgers.
I'll keep it in the same stadium. For me, it's Daniel Jones. ACL tear last season. Feels like maybe there's some challenges working back from that. Big year. I mean, the hard knock stuff with Joe Shane and, hey, I'm not paying a quarterback $40 million to hand it off to a $12 million running back. We're going to get the offensive line improved. We're going to find the number one wide receiver in the draft, and Daniel Jones is going to do it or don't. And, man, I'm nervous about it. I really am. And, I mean, Darren Waller's not there. Saquon Barkley's not there. I mean, that's some big-time playmakers for that offense. You're hoping Malik Neighbors can be a thing, and I like Malik Neighbors, but I think he's more of a weapon in terms of yards after catch and athleticism than he is a polished route technician at this point. I think he could be an amazing player. I'm not sure that's going to happen right away when Daniel Jones needs him the most, with a bunch of other kind of like strange fit together receivers around him. And I'm not sure how much better this offensive line really is. Like, I don't know, man. It might be just a matter of time before Drew Lock is slinging it in New York.
Yeah. Lots of quarterback changes probably coming with the bottom 8 on this list too. Right. And not necessarily for injury, for performance questions. But that's going to do it for us. We got to get out of here. Kyle Crabbs, Joe Marino, Locked On NFL Scouting. We're doing coaches coming up next. It's kind of our next chapter of this project for team assessments. So you can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Make it a great rest of your day. We are out of here for now, and we hope to see you all again soon.